When I look back at yesterday, I'm okay. Really? Really is the question. Because when we listen to that song, we know that she wants to say I'm okay. She wants to believe I'm okay. But at some point, things still just aren't right. This morning, we're going to look at the reality that there are things in our life that want to stay, that we feel like we can't escape, that we carry with us for long periods of time. Sometimes things that were done out of our control, sometimes things in our control, sometimes circumstances, no matter what it is. This morning we want to take an honest look at, can we really be free? And if we can, what does it take to really be free? Not just shove it down so far that we try to ignore it, or at some point create, enough space to where we go, okay, I'm functional, I can make it through. But can we thrive in things that we cannot change? Things that deeply impact us. We've been looking at the giants in our life, and 2 weeks ago we looked at the giants that I created, the messes that I got myself into. Last week we looked at the giants I've met, which are stuff other people did that I had no control over, but I still had to deal with it. Today, when we look at giants I've always known, we're looking at things that are lifelong issues, things that we have to walk through that aren't going to go away. They're not just going to disappear at some point. It's not just a short-term little headache I've got to deal with, or a short-term crisis that I've got to push my way through. We're talking about this probably is not going to change. I'm going to have to walk with this for a very long time. Does that mean that I can't have health? Does that mean that I cannot have life? I believe that God can give us the ability to thrive no matter what our circumstance and no matter what our situation. And for a guy like me, that if we were to take all of our pain and all of our woundedness and all of our hurt and whatnot, many of you would have way more than I've got. Or at least it would be in different places that impact in different ways. But I believe that we have case studies over and over, people that I know, that I have done life with, that have experienced the hardest places that life presents, the loss and the death of a child, being placed in a wheelchair at a very young age and having to live there for the rest of your life, cancer, disappointment, discouragement, heartaches, and dysfunctional family situations that even though we get some margin of distance, we never get freedom. These are the kind of things that life on this planet holds. It is the reality. It's the truth of the world in which we live. That is not the way that God designed it. God was in for perfection. And He said that we're actually heading back to perfection, but in the short run, we're having to deal with sin and the effects of it. And some of them are, as in 2 weeks ago, stuff that we create for ourselves. We can mess up our own world pretty good. Other things are dysfunctional people and dysfunctional situations we have to deal with. But there are things that are lifelong, or the effects seek to be lifelong. And we need to look honestly at them. We don't need to put some kind of happy face and go, oh, don't worry, be happy. Man, I hate that song. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's a quippy little tune, but I've never liked that song. Because I have never, ever liked anybody in the middle of my pain to walk up and go, well, don't worry, just be happy. It's like, okay, you know what would really make me happy right now? Just slapping the taste out of your mouth, right? Just one of those moments where you go, no, I don't want to worry. But this don't worry, be happy is pretty insane. I mean, you just don't go, well, it doesn't matter, because it does matter, and it touches me deeply, and it affects the people around me. So let's get forward. Now, the first thing that we have to look at, especially in situations where we have been hurt or wounded by other people, and it's not going to change. I come from a legacy of brokenness. My grandfather was verbally and physically abusive to my dad. And my dad swore, and he told me this. He said, I swore I would never, ever raise my hand to my wife or to my children the way that my dad did. And he kept that word. Not once did he ever hit my mother, and not once did he ever hit one of us kids. But he never got healed, and he never got healthy from that type of wound that little child represented there. He remained very angry and very broken. And he never raised his hand, but almost daily he raised his voice because he could never get past the pain and the frustration and the anger that he felt in his own life. And a lot of that fell on us as kids. But I'm here today to tell you, no matter what that situation is, it stopped in my generation. It didn't go on to my children. It ended. And the reason it ended is not because I'm some great guy. It's because I got a great God. And only God can heal those kind of wounds. Only God can break those kind of bonds, those chains, because we can't do it ourselves. I can't have great enough self-talk or enough Xanax to give me the ability to get healthy beyond those type of wounds. I can say I'm okay, but am I really okay? Does my life really change? Am I able to be joyful and filled with life and hope and purpose? And do I transmit that to the next generation, or do I just give a healthier version of the dysfunction that I walked in? One of the greatest tragedies for me was walking with my dad so many years and seeing him fight in his own strength to be healthier, but couldn't quite get his head around the fact that God could heal him. He never could quite get a grip on the fact that maybe God could do a miracle in my life. And my prayer is that there would be no one here in this room today that would leave and be in that condition that I can't get my head around the fact that God can heal me. But how do we get there? The first thing is we've got to be grateful for what God has done in my life. Almost everything we're going to talk about today is our focus. We got to figure out our focus and because we all interpret life. Everybody has hard places. Everybody has struggles. Everybody has brokenness. Everybody has woundedness. Everybody's going to get stabbed in the back, going to get betrayed. The question is, what are we going to do with that? I mean, if you got the business guy and he deals with Sam Shady, and Sam Shady just works him over. I mean, takes him for a huge chunk of cash. And another guy down the street was also dealing with Sam Shady, and he gets taken for just as much. And the first guy goes, you don't trust people. They will hose you every single time. Never trust another soul. Always watch your back. The second guy goes, I got to be more careful who I hook up with, because Sam Shady was a bad decision. The next time I hook up with someone, I'm going to check a little deeper. Both of them had the exact same experience, but they interpreted it different ways. Guess who's going to have a healthy business? Guy number two. Because guy number one that says, I'll never trust another person, I'll never give myself in it, is never going to have a healthy business. They allowed that wound. They interpreted it and said, everyone will cheat you. Everyone, you could never trust anyone. You could never go there. Once I create that suspicious attitude, I will never let someone in enough to even bless me. Walls around my life. I created dysfunction because I believe that everyone's going to be there. The second person goes, I've just got to be wiser. I've got to look better. Because I know there are people that I can trust. They're not going to have those same walls. We all interpret life. We all figure out how we're going to process what goes on in our world and how we're going to move forward in that. And the way that we interpret that's going to create the environment that we live in. So the first place that we have to start is, for me, you know, personally, I begin to ask and begin to think about the type of scenarios that we're in. And so I made several phone calls, and I didn't get a hold of everybody I wanted to get a hold of. But one of the people that I got a hold of was a friend of mine that I met when I was 16 years old. And his name is Hicks. And some of you all know him. Hicks Watson lives here in Hendersonville, owns an insurance company. Hicks is in a wheelchair because at the age of 15 years old, he was racing motocross, and he tried a very aggressive move. He crashed and did damage to his spine, and it paralyzed him from the waist down. And at that moment, his whole world changed. Everything in his life changed. And I began to ask him. I said, when I talked to him on the phone yesterday, I said, Hicks, I said, I just want to ask you about your life, because I've known you, I've seen you through the years, we've done life together, but I want to ask you this question. And I said, I need you to be honest with me. Don't tell me the Christian answer. Don't tell me the proper answer, that we're all supposed to believe. I said, I want to know the hard, cold facts. I said, how do you move forward? Where do you carry hurt? Where do you carry bitterness? Where do you carry all of those kind of things? And he goes, John, honest to goodness, I don't have any. I really don't. Because when I gave my life to the Lord, he goes, God transformed me as a teenager. And he goes, when I hit the ground that day, and when I woke up, at the hospital and realized I would never walk again, he goes, that was a shock, and I had a ways to go. He goes, but I knew God had not turned his back on me. He goes, I knew. And I had that relationship with God. And he goes, I don't know that I've ever doubted that, honestly, ever in my life. And he goes, but I did have to adjust to a lot of stuff. And during the course of what I talk about today, I'm going to talk a little bit about Hicks and our conversation about adjusting to my life is radically changed. And now I have to move forward. I'm going to refer a little bit to mine and a few other things. But as we go forward, the first thing is a feeling of gratitude. Of going, God, you have done so much for me. I think one of the greatest things that separated my experience from my dad's experience was my dad was never able to be thankful because he always regretted the pain in his life. He interpreted what was going on always based on what he couldn't change rather than what could be changed. And we all have a choice. We got to figure out what we're going to focus on. We can focus on everything that we can't change, or we can focus on the things that we can change. I'm going to argue today that you start focusing on the things that you can change and begin to have some faith that the things that you can't change are not going to be the ending story of your happiness in your life. So the first thing is we got to start with gratitude. The second thing is we got to be willing to forgive, because people are going to hurt us and they are going to wound us. And even the people I love the most. My wife, I have to ask her to forgive me over and over again. I don't want to hurt her, but I'm a jerk sometimes. I got an attitude, I'm selfish. I got all that kind of stuff going on, right? And there are times that I just have to say, I am sorry, that is not who I want to be. But if she wanted to be angry at me all the time, I give her plenty of reason, But we made a decision. We don't want to have an unhappy, miserable marriage. How many people in here want an unhappy, miserable marriage? Nobody. Then why do we do the stupid things we do to make it so unhappy and miserable? Why? Because we're selfish, because you did more than I did, and I want to be cranky, and I had a hard day, and I don't want to be. Well, we can figure out a million reasons, but the ultimate the result is we end up with misery rather than with joy. And so forgiveness, the reason my wife accepts my forgiveness is not because I earned it or I did anything. It's because she didn't want to have a miserable life. None of us want a miserable marriage. None of us want a miserable life. But if you were to look at our actions and the things that we choose to think about our spouse, or the things that we choose to think about our relatives or the people around us, and the things that we focus on and the things that we hold on to, you would think we did. Because those things are cancer. And what are we going to focus on? Where are we going to go? That's the reason forgiveness is about going, I am going to choose health over dysfunction. Think of it that way. Because every time that justice bone jumps up and goes, but they were wrong, and I deserve to be angry, I should make our marriage miserable for at least 2 weeks over that. You go, that doesn't make sense, right? Why does that one bad event mean that we should make 2 weeks bad? I mean, it doesn't make sense. But there's that justice thing. But they were wrong, right? Yes, they were wrong. But the way that you make that thing healthy is not by making it wrong longer, right? I mean, at some point, we have to move forward. Now, here's the problem. What do we do when a person stays dysfunctional? We got some things here, right? The first thing is, and I love Peter in this. Peter and Luke, I'm sorry, got the wrong verse. Matthew 18:21. Peter comes up to Jesus and says, Lord, how many times should I forgive my brother who sins against me? Up to 7 times? I'm sure he thought he was being really generous, like Jesus was going to go, oh, Peter, I'm so proud of you. That is awesome, man. Dude, 7 times? You're the most forgiving person I know. You've been listening to everything I said, right? And Jesus goes, scrap that. 70 times 7 in a day. And continually, over and over and over again. Why? Because the second that forgiveness stops flowing, dysfunction comes home to stay. And who wants to live in dysfunction? None of us. And there's nobody that you're ever going to find that isn't going to fail you, that isn't going to hurt you. So I've got to be able to have forgiveness to be able to get to healthy. Now, I may need to have good boundaries because there are people who are chronically and terminally unhealthy people. And, my dad was not totally flawed. I mean, he did love me. He made every football game that I ever played in, every basketball game, he coached. He wanted to be there. But the problem is, in so many areas, he was so eaten up with anger and hurt and bitterness that he also created some really dysfunctional things. And then he figured out that beer made it better in his mind, right? Not for the rest of us. But so, we had to put up boundaries. And I had to say, when we're here, we can be, together. And when you start to fall off this other edge, I'll love you, I'll call you tomorrow, but I'm just not going to have these dysfunctional conversations, or I'm not going to have my kids up here while this is going on. And we had to kind of walk through that. We do have to have boundaries. I'm not saying that doesn't have to happen, but there comes a point in my life, and this is one of those great stories that I get to tell from time to time, because I tell this story occasionally. And I was on a drive to take care of my dad. In the middle of high school, I was having to drive an hour and a half both ways to take care of him because of a disc problem that he had, and he was all alone out in Dixon. And I was so ticked. I was so angry. I was so mad at the inertia of my life that I had to do this because no one else was able to do it, and it was my lot. And as I'm driving, I have this thought that comes through my mind as I'm seething over the inertia of my life and everything that I can't control and why I'm so, ticked off about it. And the thought was, are you happy? And I answered it out loud. I said, as long as I don't have to be around my dad. And the very next thought that came through my mind was, your dad's never been happy. He's always been miserable, and he makes people around him miserable. And it wasn't like I didn't know that. It was just at that moment, for the first time, instead of feeling anger and bitterness and frustration, I actually felt compassion. And at that moment, God did a miracle in my life. And that's the third point. Only God can do the miracle of forgiveness and set us free. So we better start praying for it. Now here's where I get to tell the good story. I've told that story many times here. Well, we've got this 100% group, and we got these guys in the group. And we got a guy whose wife really messed him over. And I've talked to him over the last 6-9 months. And we prayed about it. And he said, every time I have to deal with this situation, it just takes me right back to the bottom every single time. And so we prayed. And he came into our group last week. And he said, I ended up on the phone, and the conversation was dysfunctional, and I just felt myself going to the bottom. And he goes, and I've prayed over and over and over again, God, I don't want to carry this. I don't want this to be in my life. And he goes, right in the middle of the conversation, I just said, I forgive you. I forgive you. And he said, I don't even remember what her response was. She just kind of, she said whatever. And, he goes, but I'm telling you, the second that those words came out of my mouth, he goes, it felt like someone took a cancer out of my life. And he goes, that was last week. And he goes, I've never felt so free in my entire life. He goes, the pain and the anger and the bitterness just disappeared in the instant that I said those words. God will not do that in spite of us, guys. He wanted it. He'd come up after service, we'd sat together, we'd prayed and said, God, I need this cancer out of my life. I have been hurt, I have been wounded, I have been betrayed, and every time I have to deal with this situation, it is killing me. God, I need to be free. And he began to fight. And at that moment when God prompted him in the middle of a dysfunctional situation to go, instead of doing what seems natural, what seems, I am going to just speak these words. And when he did, he said, God set me free. Now, to our knowledge, she hadn't changed that much. My dad didn't change significantly, but something changed in me. And it started when I was willing to go, God, I am not going to hold on to this anymore. Nate DeGraff, one of our counselors here, has this great statement. Because if somebody came into your house and trashed everything, and spray painted the walls and whatnot, would you offer them free rent? And he goes, no, you wouldn't even let them in the house, right? If they trashed your house every time they showed up, you wouldn't even let them in. He goes, so why when people try to trash your life, do you give them free rent in your head? Good question. Probably the same reason I've become a jerk for 2 weeks in my marriage, because I want to have a great marriage. Right? Why do I do these stupid things, right? Why do I sabotage myself? Because I don't get God's perspective. Now, I know it's hard. I stand up here every week and try to get you to trust God and forgive people. Jesus had the same problem, right? He goes, someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to the left, right? It's like everybody goes, oh, he's a prophet. Let's do that, right? No. It's so counter to our human nature to do the things that are actually going to produce health. And yet most of us know that most of the things that we do in our marriages and our relationships and dysfunctional situations don't promote health. They only prolong dysfunction. And at some point, we've got to trust God. And that brings us to our last point here, which is realize that God's responsible to fix the injustice, not me. That if God is the only one that can heal me, and God's the only one that can fix them. And anything that I'm doing out of anger or bitterness or anything else is only keeping us dysfunctional for longer. At some point, I got to get healthy. And the great news is, I can get healthy even if they don't. And then we can start to move forward. And that's the reason I love that story. And he was here in the first service, and he came up because you're talking about me, weren't you? And I said, yeah, buddy. And he goes, I just love being free. I just wanted to be free. I didn't want to carry that cancer in my life anymore. I love Kathy Allred. She says, harboring that stuff and giving that person free rent, and just holding on and focusing on that over and over again. It's like drinking poison, hoping the other person will die, right? It just doesn't work that way. At some point, we got to let God deal with them. We may have to set some healthy boundaries. I'm not saying that, but at some point I got to let it go and just go, I've got things I have got to do and they are ahead of me. I cannot continue to let all this stuff beside me and behind me manipulate and control me. And so, that's where we have to trust God. Now here's the other thing. What do we do when we have Hicks-type situations? To where my life has just changed. I can't control it. Everything. I'm going to give you a couple of points. The first point is, it's changed. Hello? Life has changed. I've got to quit looking backwards, wanting it to be what it was. I've got to go, okay, God, now do miracles in what it is. It has changed. It isn't going to be the same. You know, when I talked to Hicks, it was funny because when we were in high school, in youth group, when he was in high school, nothing changed about his life except he couldn't walk. You know, and he talked about that. He said, he goes, the great thing was, he goes, I had friends crazy enough to carry me up on the high dive and throw me off because I didn't want to miss that. He goes, I still wanted to ride my bike. He goes, I actually, when my mom was gone, because she never would put up for this, he goes, I had my dad duct tape my feet to the pegs on either side, put it in first gear, and give me a push so I could just drive around the yard on the thing. He goes, I wasn't going to quit living life just because my circumstances had changed. He was always, the reason he got hurt on the bikes because he was a little, thrill seeker. And this guy would pop that wheelchair up on those back two wheels and then run down the stairs in them, and then he'd do it with people in his lap. And it was like he said, I will not miss anything in life. A couple of weeks ago, we saw Nick, whatever his last name is. I never could pronounce it. I'm dyslexic. I have a bye. But Nick, who had no arms and no legs, and yet he motivates people every day of his life. And you hear him. Nick said in that video clip that we watch, he said, I know that God didn't do this to me because he was angry with me, which is point 2. I'm not being punished if I have heartache in my life. Scripture says this, John 16:33, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace, that you may be comforted, that you may be okay. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. Now this is a very interesting verse. He goes, I'm saying this so that you can be at peace because the world ain't going to be. You are going to have heartache. You are going to have trouble. The world is fallen. It is in the throes of dysfunction. And it's going to hit all of us at some point, at some place. We're not going to all have it all, but we're all going to have some. And he goes, I'm telling you this so that you can have peace even though that's going on around you. Because in this world, when you have trouble, I've overcome the world. I will give you the ability to thrive. As I sat there and talked last night with Hicks on the phone, he said, he goes, if you ask me, he goes, I cannot honestly tell you that my life would have been better if I was not in a wheelchair. He goes, I have a sneaking suspicion it's better because I'm in a wheelchair. He goes, because I know my personality. And he goes, I know where I would have gone. He goes, I know what I could have been. He goes, I could have been all about me, look at me, be about me, everything's about me. All I want to do is get stuff for me. And he goes, this is oriented my world different. He goes, I had to actually trust other people. I had to lean on some other folks, and I had to learn some character traits I didn't have. He goes, I found a wife that loves me for me. And she didn't even know if we could have children, but God gave me 2 kids. And he goes, I haven't missed a thing with my kids. He goes, I coach their ball teams. He goes, I have a successful business. He goes, but I can tell you this. He goes, there are people that they ask me to go speak to all the time. They're in my same situation. He goes, I'm called all the time because I have such joy and such passion in my life to talk to somebody that's in a wheelchair and they're an alcoholic and they can't hold a job and they can't move. And he goes, and I try every way I know how to tell them that God has not done this to you to hurt you, that you can be healthier in that chair than you could have been walking around on 2 legs. He goes, but most people don't want to believe it. And he goes, it's frustrating because life is right there in front of them. And they won't take it. Because they look only at what they've lost. They look only at what they can't control. They look only at the grief and the anger over what they want that they can have, rather than seeing that there's a world full of blessing right there in front of them, if they would just reach out and grab it. That's the very same thing that Nick says in those videos. He goes, I got no arms and no legs, and I got more joy and more life than most people running around with 2 arms and 2 legs. He said, I love that passage. He goes, when I read the story of the man born blind, and everybody said, was it because of his sin or his parents' sin that he was born blind? He goes, I always wanted to know, why did this happen to me? He goes, Jesus said very simply, it wasn't any of that. It was so that my glory could be made known through his life. And Nick said, God's glory is being made known through my life. He goes, I have more people and I touch more lives with no arms and legs than I ever would have if I had had arms and legs. When I talked to Hicks, he said he was the only thing that my wife is angry about me being in a wheelchair is that we can't get in and out of Walmart fast. And he goes, it has nothing to do with my ability to get in and out fast. I move faster than most people. I'm on wheels. He goes, the thing is, people sneak in and out of Walmart all the time and nobody pays attention to them or talks to them or has any interaction. He goes, I can't go into Walmart without having 2 or 3 people. Hicks, how you doing? What's going on, man? Right, you know. And he goes, they interact because at some point they think, if I was in that situation, could I have that kind of joy? If I was in that circumstance, would I be miserable or would I be filled with purpose in life? And he goes, I can't sneak in and out of hardly any place without somebody going, Hicks, what's up? What's going on, man? You know, how's things going? He goes, I have deeper relationships. I have people that care, that interact with me. There's a richness in my life. And if I wasn't in this wheelchair, I could probably sneak in and out of Walmart with everybody else and nobody even pay attention to me or even care that I was there. He goes, we can focus on a million things. He goes, I believe that my life is more blessed. He goes, it's different. I have limitations. I have things that I can't do. But there are way more things that I can do. If Hicks was here this morning in his wheelchair, or if Nick was standing over here with no arms and no legs, I remember people, when we showed the video of Nick and just the joy emanating from him and all those teenagers crying and hugging him and just the impact that he was having in people's lives. And people made the statement, right? What was the statement most everybody made? What have I got to complain about? Seriously, I mean, really, what do I have to complain about? You know, you can argue with me and go, you know, you don't know where I'm coming from, but there's a whole bunch of people with a whole lot more joy than some of us in this room that have a whole lot more handicap to overcome. And the only difference is, what are they focusing on and what are they looking to? Because the next one, after I'm not being punished, is I got to lean on my family and friends and give the attention to those specific relationships. You know, over and over, I always feel like I need to make this kind of statement. I always go, you know, I've had so little pain in my life that, you know, I just feel so blessed that sometimes I feel like I really can't relate to other people. And then I step back for just a second and I go, you know what? I mean, you know, my childhood wasn't as rosy as I would like childhoods to be. And, you know, I broke my ankle 8 years ago. And when I broke my ankle, that's the reason I wear these goofy shoes. See that? People, every once in a while, I put on a pair of tennis shoes. They go, you're not wearing your goofy shoes. People know me by these shoes. Now, the reason I have those is because after I broke my ankle, within a 3-year span, I had 4 surgeries. And within that 3-year span, I was on crutches and in a cast for a year and a half. That's a hassle. I'm not going to tell you. But the one thing that I did to blow off steam and to have fun, just to get church and problems and everything out of my head for just a little while, was to go water skiing. And I had that same moment that Hicks had when I realized I will probably never be able to ski again because of my ankle. And here's the thing. I guess I could have been upset about that, but you know, the second thought that came through my mind was, if that's going to tank my life, that's the highlight of my life, that if I don't have that, the tragedy of my life is not that I can't ski. The tragedy of my life is that water skiing is the only thing that's going to make me happy. You know, I mean, when it comes down to it, I mean, water skiing's fun, and I hope everybody gets to do a lot of it, but Man, if that's the highlight of my life and that's going to shipwreck my happiness and my joy for the rest of my life, I was messed up before I ever broke my ankle. And I know a lot of people that are grieving over losing some things that aren't the big stuff and they aren't the most important things. And I found out I had to swim because it was the only thing I could do. I couldn't run, I couldn't jump, I couldn't do anything. So I had to swim, and I hate to swim. I hate to swim. Both of my siblings and both of my kids were on the swim team, and I never swam a lap, right? Because I hate to swim. So I had to go swim to rehabilitate my ankle. How many of you all know that, the only injury that you can add to an injury is to have to do something you hate to do to fix, to make it a little bit better, right? Guess what? After a couple of months, I looked forward to swimming. It was the one place in my life that was quiet and peaceful for 45 minutes every morning. I started thinking. All of a sudden, what I thought was going to be a miserable chore ended up being a blessing that I just didn't realize was out there waiting on me. As I began to listen to Hicks last night, Robbie had a party. We're having the baptism at Robbie's place on the 29th, and he has got the most beautiful pool you ever saw. But it's got waterfalls in it. And so my wife was at the top of one of the waterfalls, so I climbed up there in my bare feet because I forgot I got an ankle problem. And going up's cool. It's coming down that's a mess, right? And so I got ready to come down, and if I'm barefoot when I don't have on my goofy shoes, I have to walk sideways to even be able to move because my ankle joints fuse together, and the nerve damage is so whacked out on the bottom of my foot. I'm trying to stand on these goofy rocks and coming back down this thing, and Paul goes, "Do we need to get you help?" And I'm going, my life is not without hassle. My kids started playing tennis 8 years ago when I broke my ankle. I've never been able to get on the court and ever play with them. I would love to play tennis with my son. I mean, it'd be a great, fun thing to do. Just out of the cards for me. I broke my ankle. No longer a possibility. But I'm telling you, the most important things I could do with my kids don't have anything to do with tennis. At some point, we got to step back and go, what are the most important things and what are not? And if I focus on the wrong stuff, I will stay miserable. But God wants to make me free. He wants me to be healthy. I've struggled with dyslexia my whole life. Every week I go through this same exercise. I bet you none of you all do this. Every week I have to look up all these scriptures and to pull them out of my computer. And the biggest challenge I have all week long is to find 2 or 3 words that I can spell to be able to find. It's like, I'll type it in, boom, it's the wrong spelling, it's the wrong spelling, it's the wrong spelling. Okay, what could it be? I can't use that word and this word. What other words are in that verse, right? And you just go, what a nightmare and hassle that is to have to go through. I'm filling out paperwork down at the, at the DMV or something like, I don't know what I'm filling out. The other day, I had to fill out 4 college requests for my daughter. It took me 40 minutes because I never could figure out how to spell Bellhaven. I don't know why don't you name it, Smith School, right? I can spell that, right? And so I'm having to walk up and ask people, or I'm having to say it into my iPad and then look at it and then I'm going, this is such a hassle. People ought to fill these things out for you, right? You ought to walk up and go, fill those 3 things out for me right there. My daughter wants to go to college. All of us have stuff, but I never look at that. I never go, wow, God, why did you give me dyslexia? Why did my ankle get broken? Why did I have to be raised in a family where my dad was sober? I don't know. I don't look at that. I don't focus on that. Why? Because there's so many things that God is doing in my life over and over that if I focused on that other stuff, it would make my life dysfunctional. The same way if I focus on all the things that drives me crazy about my wife, or she focused on all the things that I do that freak her out, we just have a horrible marriage. But there are so many more things that are healthy. So the last one is always search for and find what God is doing through the new situation. Because I'm guaranteeing you God is there. Colossians 3:2 says, set your mind on things above, not on earthly things, for you died and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Philippians 4:8 says, brothers, whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's admirable, if there's anything excellent or praiseworthy, focus on that. Think about that. Get your head there. Because there's a lot of people in wheelchairs that are miserable and think that there is no life. But I know a guy named Hicks, and he's in a wheelchair, and he's living life with every fiber of his being. A lot of people look back at their glory days, what I did in high school. And you go, man, if I got to look all the way back to high school to find my glory days, I'm missing life. Because I'm telling you what, life isn't back there, it's out here. If I got to sit around and moan about the fact that I can't play tennis or go water ski, then I got bigger problems in my life. Because I'm telling you what, every time I invest in your lives, in the lives of my children, in my family, I find a life that kicks water skiing right in the butt. It's better. I've got enough heartache that if I wanted to focus on that, I could be miserable. But I've got so much of what God is offering every single day that if I focus on that, I find life. But we got to make the choices. God's not going to drag us to it. And then the greater hope is this. This life is short. Feels long, but it's not. It's very short. James 4:15 says, "Oh, what is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes." Just like steam. They just, whew. Why is that? Because this is temporary. And what God planned for us is perfection. Y'all like perfection? How many people want perfection? That's where we're going. The reason that we're having this is so we get perfection. Most people don't understand that. You see, God created imperfection twice. He created the angels in perfection, and they rebelled and fell. He created mankind in perfection, and they rebelled and fell. He said, this ain't working. No, obviously. He goes, we're going to go the other way around at this thing. We're going to let you figure out what sin really looks like so that when I give you perfection again, you'll never go back and get this garbage ever, ever again. But He can't just show us a little photograph and go, hey, this is what sin looks like. Don't go for that. You know why? Because we're stupid. Hello? Every last one of us. That's the reason we keep dragging fights in our marriage out 3 weeks rather than fixing it in 3 minutes, right? Because we're stupid sometimes. A lot of us, I hear people, why didn't God just tell us what's... I said, have you read the Bible? It wasn't like He's hiding it, It's just we read it and go, yeah, maybe. He said, okay, I'll let you really see it. All of it. I'll let you see where it goes and how ugly it gets. Because at some point you got to hate it the way that I do. Because the only way that we're going to get perfection is that when we get there, we understand what sin is too. But He said, this life is very short. And in heaven, 2 Corinthians 4:16 says, therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we're being renewed day by day. For these light and momentary troubles, let me parenthetically say, Paul's light and momentary struggles were in prison 3 times, beaten with rods, stoned and left for dead. I don't know where he gets his terms for light and momentary, but that was his light and momentary, right? These light and momentary troubles are achieving for us eternal glory that far outweighs them all. What is he saying? The stuff we walk through here is providing the opportunity to spend eternity, which is going to be the real life, in perfection, which is what all of us want to begin with. So he says, these light and momentary struggles are achieving for us a glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, what's going on around me, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, and what is unseen is eternal. Here's the great news. He says we can thrive even in the midst of sin. Hicks thrives in a wheelchair. Nick thrives with no arms and legs. because they chose what they're going to focus on. They chose where their purpose is going to be. They're not going to look at everything they can't do. They're going to look at everything they can do. They're going to focus on what God's doing in the middle of the moment. They're going to rise up and take and seize every moment of every day, and they are going to find life that is life. And some of us, not in wheelchairs, with both arms and legs, are hanging on to the wrong stuff and focusing on the wrong stuff, and we're staying stuck and dysfunctional. And God is pleading, let me heal you. Some of us this week may need, just out of faith, to do what that guy in my group did. Just go, I forgive you. I don't want this cancer in my life. Some of us need to go, you know what, I may never water ski again. I may never walk again. I may never whatever again. But there are great things ahead of me, and I'm going to seize what God's doing, and I'm going to find life, and I'm going to pursue it, and I'm going to pour my life into relationships, and this is not going to be the final chapter of my life. I am going to find hope. Because like this final says, and I'm just going to say it, I haven't got time for pain. I haven't got time. I haven't got the need for the pain. I haven't got the heart for the pain. Not since I found Christ. Not since I found Him. I don't want to stay in it any longer than I have to. I may never be able to truly water ski again. I may never be able to run or play tennis or do. I got a bunch of things that I may never get to do again. But the things that matter the most, I get to do them every single day. Let's pray. Father, I don't know where the pain is in each and every person that is in this room today. I only know where mine has been and where a couple of close friends and family have been. But Father, I have seen that you can change broken and wounded hearts. That you bind up the brokenhearted and you heal their wounds. Father, I thank you that dysfunction of anger and abuse stopped in my generation because of your miraculous healing power, and that it was not passed on to my children. God, I pray that same gift for every person that walks in those same type of legacies that are listening to this prayer right now. God, that you would begin to break those strongholds. Lord, as we begin to take control of what we allow ourselves to focus on, as we pray for that miracle, that God, you will break that stronghold in our life, as we begin to walk in the obedience to allow forgiveness and to let you hold people accountable, but that we are going to go on to healthy. That, Lord, you will break the chains and the shackles that hold us tight. Father, for every single one of us that walk with limps, that ride in wheelchairs, that hold struggling children, that deal with the real things that a fallen world brings into our life, and we know that they are not going to change anytime soon. That, Father, you will focus us, that we will begin to thrive, that we don't have time for the pain and the dysfunction and the situation to be on top of us, but that we are going to begin to look for what you can do, no matter what the circumstances, no matter what the situation. That when Paul said these light and momentary struggles are achieving for us a weight of glory that we will not be able to contain. He understood that what's going on here is short term, but heaven is eternal, and that we can even thrive now. God, let that truth transform our lives as we walk through it. In Jesus' name, amen.